My grandmother built her bakery with her own hands. Flour-dusted, 4 a.m. hands that shaped loaves before the rest of the town was even awake. She left it to me. But my uncle decided I didn't deserve it, and then the accountant found the books. That's the short version. Here's what actually happened. Grandma Rose passed on a Tuesday in early March, the kind of cold that settles into old buildings and doesn't leave until May. She was 81, sharp until almost the very end, and she smelled like vanilla and lemon zest even in the hospital. I held her hand when she went. My uncle wasn't there, he'd sent flowers. The bakery, Rosie's, on Clement Street, had been running for 43 years. It wasn't famous, it wasn't a destination spot. But it was hers, and it was real. And on Saturday mornings, there was always a line out the door for the cardamom rolls. I had worked there since I was 11 years old. First washing sheet pans, then learning to laminate dough, then managing the books when I was in college. I became a forensic accountant. I always joked that Grandma Rose taught me the two most important things in life, how to balance butter and how to balance a ledger. She thought that was funny every single time. She left the bakery to me. The building, the equipment, the name, the recipes in her handwriting that lived in a battered green binder on the second shelf. It was in her will, filed with her attorney, witnessed and signed. It was mine. The email from my uncle came 4 days after the funeral. I was sitting at my kitchen table, still wearing the same cardigan I'd had on for 2 days, eating crackers because I hadn't had the energy to cook anything real. His name on my screen felt like a cold draft under a door. We had never been close. My uncle, my mother's older brother, had always existed at the edges of our family, showing up for holidays when it suited him, borrowing money he never paid back, charming everyone in the room while doing very little of substance. Grandma Rose loved him because he was her son, but she also, I think, saw him clearly. The email was 3 sentences. Talk to the family. We think it makes more sense for the bakery to go to someone who can actually run it. Call me. I read it 4 times. Then I called my mother, who said she hadn't talked to anyone and that she had no idea what he was referring to. Then I called him. He picked up on the first ring, which told me he'd been waiting. "Sweetheart," he said, and I already wanted to hang up. "I know this is hard. We're all grieving, but you live 40 minutes away. You have a real career. What are you going to do? Give that up to sell bread?" I said slowly and carefully. That the bakery was left to me. That I was the executor of Grandma Rose's will. That I had a plan. "I know what the will says," he told me, his voice getting a little less warm. "But wills can be challenged." And frankly, I think my mother wasn't fully herself at the end. She was on a lot of medication. She was emotional. She made a sentimental choice, and the rest of the family thinks it should be corrected. The rest of the family, as if he'd taken a vote, as if there was a committee. "I'm her granddaughter," I said. "I've worked in that bakery for over 20 years. She taught me the recipes. She made me execute her. This isn't a sentimental choice. It's a deliberate one." There was a pause. Then, "I'm just saying there are options. Talk to me before you do anything rash." I didn't say anything rash. I said goodbye and I hung up and I sat in my kitchen in my 2-day-old cardigan and I let myself feel the particular kind of rage that comes when someone confirms exactly what you always suspected about them. Then I opened my laptop and called the attorney. The attorney, Mr. Okonkwo, had done Grandma Rose's estate planning for 15 years. He was calm and precise, and he told me exactly what I already knew. The will was valid, clearly written, and filed properly. He also told me that my uncle had already called him twice that week. That told me everything. I drove to the bakery the next morning. I had a key. I'd always had a key, and I let myself in to the back. The kitchen smelled exactly like it always had, warm even with the ovens off. That permanent ghost of vanilla and yeast that had soaked into the walls over 4 decades. I walked through slowly, running my fingers along the edge of the work table, checking the walk-in, looking at the green binder on the second shelf exactly where it always was. Then I looked at the register. The drawer was open. That wasn't unusual. Grandma Rose always left it open overnight so anyone who broke in would see it was empty. But there was something in the back corner of the drawer, a receipt I didn't recognize. A handwritten receipt for a catering deposit, $1,200, made out to an LLC I had never heard of. The date was 2 weeks before she died. I took a photo and I kept moving. Over the next 3 days, I went through every paper in that bakery. Every folder in the back office, every invoice, every bank statement I could pull. I was a forensic accountant. This was, technically, exactly my job. And what I found made the catering receipt look like a parking ticket. The bakery had a business checking account and a separate savings account that Grandma Rose had used as a kind of buffer, slow months, equipment repairs, that sort of thing. I had known about both of them. What I hadn't known was the third account, a business money market account, opened 18 months earlier, with my uncle listed as an authorized signer. The stated purpose on the paperwork, in his handwriting, was Operational Contingency Fund. Grandma Rose's signature was on the account opening form, but her signature looked different, looser, less precise. She'd had a small tremor in the last year that she hated acknowledging. It was the kind of difference most people wouldn't notice. I noticed. I pulled every statement I could access as executor. Over 14 months, exactly $3,200 had been transferred out of the bakery savings and into the money market account. From the money market account, the money had been moved to a personal checking account. My uncle's personal checking account, $44,800. Over a year. In transfers just irregular enough to avoid pattern detection by someone who wasn't looking closely. I sat in the back office of Rosie's bakery for a long time after I realized what I was looking at. The refrigerator hummed. Outside on Clemens Street, the morning fog was burning off and the flower vendor across the street was setting up his buckets. Grandma Rose had bought flowers from him every Friday for 30 years. I thought about the medication my uncle had mentioned on the phone. The wasn't fully herself. The sentimental choice. He hadn't been worried about her mental state. He'd been worried about being caught. He wanted the will invalidated, himself installed as executor, and the estate closed before anyone looked at the books. I had just looked at the books. I went home and called Mr. Okonkwo. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Miss Vance. She was a small woman with reading glasses. She kept on a chain and a reputation in estate litigation that made opposing counsel nervous. When I laid out everything I had on her conference table, the printed statements, the signature comparison, the LLC receipt, the timeline, she looked at it all without speaking for a long moment. "Your uncle is going to file a challenge," she said. "He's already signaled it. When he does, we're going to be very ready." She tapped the third account statements. "And when he files, he opens himself up to full discovery, which means we get everything." "How much more could there be?" I asked. She looked at me over her glasses. "That's what discovery is for." I didn't hear from my uncle for almost 2 weeks. Then the challenge arrived, a formal petition to contest the will on grounds of diminished capacity and undue influence. He had hired an attorney, a man named Mr. Quay Garrett, who had a smooth phone manner and a website with a lot of stock photos of gavels. The petition claimed that Grandma Rose had been cognitively impaired in her final year, that she had been isolated from the family, and that I had exerted undue influence over her decision-making, including her estate planning. I read it twice. Then I went to my filing cabinet. I am professionally someone who documents things. But with Grandma Rose, it wasn't professional. It was just how we were. She wrote me letters. Not emails, actual letters, on the cream-colored notepaper she bought at the drugstore. I had kept every single one. I had them in a shoebox first, and then when the shoebox got full, in a proper archival folder because I couldn't bear to throw them away and I wanted them to last. There were 61 letters spanning 11 years. The last one had arrived 6 weeks before she died. "You keep the recipes safe, Wren." She had written in handwriting that was slower than it used to be, but still hers, still absolutely hers. "Everything I know is in that green binder. Don't let anyone tell you a kitchen is too small a thing to love. I built something real. Now it's yours. Take care of the cardamom rolls. People need them." There was nothing confused about that letter. There was nothing confused about any of them. Miss Vance read through the folder carefully. "This is excellent," she said. "Contemporaneous, signed, dated, consistent. What about her medical records? Her doctor?" Her doctor was a woman named Dr. Rosie, who had been Grandma Rose's physician for 9 years and who, when I called her office and explained what was happening, said, with considerable feeling, that she would be happy to provide whatever documentation was needed. "Your grandmother was one of the sharpest patients I had," she told me. "She asked better questions than most people half her age. Whoever is claiming diminished capacity is either mistaken or lying." I told her which one I thought it was. Meanwhile, Ms. Queston, Vance filed our response and simultaneously served a discovery request for every financial record associated with the bakery, the estate, and every account my uncle had been authorized on going back 12 years. Mr. Garrett filed a motion to block it, calling it grossly overbroad and designed to harass. The judge denied the motion in 2 sentences. The mandatory mediation happened on a gray Wednesday morning in a conference room that smelled like stale carpet. My uncle was already there when I arrived, sitting next to Mr. Garrett in a blazer he must have bought for the occasion. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed, which I found almost more infuriating. My cousin was there too, his daughter, sitting slightly apart from her father with the expression of someone who has been told a story she's starting to suspect isn't completely true. I noticed she didn't greet him when he tried to lean over and say something to her before we started. She looked at the table instead. Mr. Garrett opened by offering a settlement, a cash payment for my relinquishing any claim to the bakery, which would then be returned to the family estate, meaning handed to my uncle. The number he offered was $90,000. Monsieur Vance didn't even write it down. She looked at him pleasantly and said we were proceeding to trial, that we were counter-suing for damages, legal fees, and the full value of the funds removed from the business accounts over the previous 14 months. My uncle's jaw tightened. "This is extortion," he said. Not to Mr. Garrett, but directly to me. "You're using this to punish me. Your grandmother understood that family means sharing. She would have wanted." "She wrote exactly what she wanted," I said. 61 times. He blinked. "Miss Mons." Vance slid a summary sheet across the table. Not the full statements, just a single page, clean, with dates and amounts and account numbers. The kind of page that doesn't need explanation. "We've identified $44,800 transferred from the estate's operating accounts to a personal account over 14 months, she said, her voice the same temperature as the room. "As executor, my client has a fiduciary duty to recover misappropriated estate assets. We will be pursuing that, regardless of the outcome of the will challenge." My uncle looked at the paper. Then he looked at Mr. Garrett. Mr. Garrett's face had gone carefully neutral. The composure of a man recalculating. "That money was a loan," my uncle said. "My mother knew about it. She approved it. There's nothing. A $44,000 loan with no documentation, no repayment schedule, and no disclosure to the other beneficiaries," Ms. Vance said. "Taken from a business account over which you had unauthorized secondary signing access. She gave me that access." "Then you'll have no trouble producing any communication in which she did so." "We'd love to see it." He didn't answer. I looked at him across the table. My mother's brother, my grandmother's son, and I felt something go very still inside me. Not cold, not hot, just still. Like the kitchen in the morning before the ovens come on. "You were going to let me think she doubted me?" I said quietly. "You were going to stand up in court and say she wasn't herself, that she was confused, that she was vulnerable, and you were going to do that so no one would look at what you took from her." "Caroline," he started and then caught himself because that wasn't my name. "Wren," I said. "You've never once called me the right name." My cousin, his daughter, made a sound, small and involuntary. She was staring at the summary sheet. "Dad," she said slowly, "what is this number?" He turned to her, started to say something. She held up her hand. The mediation ended 20 minutes later without resolution. As we stood to leave, my cousin stayed in her seat. She didn't follow her father out. When the room had emptied and it was just the two of us and the stale carpet smell, she looked up at me. "I didn't know," she said. "I know," I told her. "What's going to happen to him?" I thought about it honestly. That depends on how much more they find. She nodded slowly. She looked about 15 years old in that moment, even though she was 28. She pulled out her phone, looked at it, put it down again. He told me Grandma Rose hadn't been right, that you'd convinced her. I believed him. She paused. I shouldn't have. No, I agreed. But you're not the one who spent a year moving money. She called Ms. Vance's office the next day and asked for a referral to an independent attorney. She wasn't a defendant, but she wanted to understand what she'd been part of, even unknowingly. That mattered to me more than I expected it to. The full discovery was a slow unrolling of something I had mostly already suspected but hadn't completely let myself believe. The $1,200 LLC receipt I had found on the first day was for a catering company, registered 3 years earlier to my uncle's home address. It had received 4 deposits from the bakery over 18 months, totaling just under $9,000, for event catering services that no one at Rosie's had any record of arranging. The deposits always happened in the months following a slow quarter when the savings buffer was already stretched. The real discovery, the one that made Miss Vance go quiet for a moment when she read it, was the investment account. Grandma Rose had opened a small brokerage account in her 70s. Nothing dramatic, some dividend-paying stocks she'd bought carefully over the years. A modest portfolio that had grown steadily because she never touched it. My uncle had power of attorney for health decisions only. Not financial decisions, not investments, but 2 years before she died, using documents Ms. Vance's team found in a records request, he had somehow obtained a separate limited financial POA from a notary in a county 3 hours away from where Grandma Rose lived. The signature on it had the same looser quality as the bank account form. With that document, 19 months before she died, he had liquidated $23,000 in stock. The proceeds had gone to a joint account, him and his wife, within 4 days. I found this out on a Thursday afternoon. I drove to the bakery and stood in the kitchen for a while, not doing anything, just standing there. The green binder was on the shelf. The cardamom rolls recipe was on page 14, written in Grandma Rose's handwriting, with a note in the margin that said, "Let the dough rest longer than you think." I wasn't just angry anymore. I was tired in a particular way. Tired of finding new layers, tired of understanding how long it had been happening, tired of calculating how much of what she built he had quietly taken while she was still alive. But I was also, underneath the tiredness, completely certain. There was nothing ambiguous about what I had in front of me, and I was the forensic accountant. This was, in the end, exactly what I was trained for. She had known that. She had always known exactly what she was doing when she put my name on those documents. The trial was in probate court, a small wood-paneled room that felt more like a conference room than a courtroom. My uncle sat at the opposing table with a new attorney, Mr. DeCourt. Garrett had withdrawn from the case 2 weeks earlier, citing irreconcilable professional differences. His replacement was a quieter man who had the expression of someone who has read the file and does not like what he's agreed to. My cousin sat behind me. She had told her father the night before that she would be there, but not with him. He had apparently not taken that well. When the judge entered, she had already read the pretrial submissions. She had the quality of someone who does not need anything repeated twice. Ms. Vance was methodical. She started with the will, its validity, the clear and consistent language, the testimony of Mr. Okonkwo, who had been present for every revision and could speak to Grandma Rose's state of mind at each meeting. Then Dr. Rosie, who was direct and precise and did not hedge. Then the letters, 61 of them, entered into evidence, the judge reading several passages aloud in a voice that was entirely level but somehow landed harder for it. Then the financial records. Miss Vance had a way of presenting numbers that was almost conversational. She didn't dramatize. She just laid them out in sequence, slowly, and let the accumulation do the work. The third account. The transfers. The LLC. The POA from the county 3 hours away. The liquidated stocks. My uncle's new attorney objected several times. The judge overruled him, each time a little more briefly. At some point, my uncle looked at me. I don't know what he was expecting. Anger, maybe, or satisfaction. I didn't feel either. I just looked back at him until he looked away. Then Ms. Vance called my cousin to the stand. She had agreed to testify voluntarily. She was sworn in and she answered every question in a clear, steady voice. Her father had told her, she said, that the bakery money transfers were a kind of retainer, because Grandma asked him to manage things. He had told her the brokerage account liquidation was reinvesting in something more stable. He had shown her a document once that she now understood was the POA from the other county. She had asked about it and he had told her it was routine. She had believed him. "Did you benefit directly from any of these funds?" Miss Vance asked. "He paid for part of my graduate school tuition one semester," she said, her voice dropping slightly. "He said it was a gift from him and my aunt. I had no reason to think." She stopped, collected herself. "No, I didn't know where it came from." "Thank you," Miss Vance said. When my cousin stepped down, she walked back to her seat behind me. She didn't look at her father once. The judge had been still and attentive for the entire proceeding. When Ms. Vance finished, she was quiet for a moment before she spoke. "In the matter of the petition to contest the will of Rose Nakamura," she said, "I find the petition wholly without merit. The petitioner has produced no credible evidence of diminished capacity or undue influence. The testimony and documentary record establish clearly that the decedent was of sound mind and deliberate intention. The petition is denied. The will stands. The bakery and all associated assets pass to the named beneficiary, Ms. Wren." My uncle's attorney started to stand and she held up one hand. "I am also awarding Miss Wren her full legal fees in this matter and punitive damages of $60,000 for the frivolous and bad faith nature of this challenge." She picked up a single sheet from her file. Furthermore, the financial records submitted in this preceding document what appears to be a sustained pattern of elder financial exploitation, misuse of fiduciary authority, and potential forgery of a legal document. I am referring this file in its entirety to the District Attorney's Office and the State Attorney General for criminal investigation. She looked at my uncle directly for the first time. "You filed this challenge to prevent these records from surfacing. You used your mother's declining years and your family relationships to enrich yourself. And then you came into this courtroom and claimed she was the one who wasn't thinking clearly." She let that sit in the room for a moment. "We are adjourned." The gavel. My uncle didn't move for a moment. His new attorney was already gathering papers with the focused efficiency of someone who has a lot of calls to make immediately. My cousin stayed in her seat until the room had mostly cleared, and then she sat next to me, which I hadn't expected, and we didn't say anything for a while. "What happens now?" she said finally. "To him. DA investigation, probably charges. The financial evidence is pretty clean." She nodded. "And to you, I go open the bakery." She looked at me. "Can I come?" We went together an hour later, driving separately and meeting on Clement Street in the afternoon fog that had rolled back in off the bay. I unlocked the back door with the key I'd always had and we went into the kitchen, and I turned on the ovens because the room felt too cold. While they heated, I showed her the green binder. She turned the pages slowly, reading the recipes in Grandma Rose's handwriting, the margin notes, the little arrows pointing to critical steps. The cardamom roll recipe on page 14. "Let the dough rest longer than you think." She was so specific, my cousin said. "She was specific about everything," I said. "That's how she built something that lasted 43 years. My uncle's arrest happened 6 weeks later at his house, not at a bank lobby. He had left his job the week after the trial. But someone from the neighborhood sent me a photo of the unmarked car in the driveway, and I won't pretend I didn't feel something when I saw it. Satisfaction isn't quite the word. More like completion. The DA charged him with elder financial abuse, misuse of power of attorney, and forgery of a notarial document. His wife, who had received the liquidated stock proceeds into their joint account, hired her own attorney and cooperated with investigators. She claimed she had not known the source of the funds. The investigation was ongoing. My cousin and I had a strange new relationship. Not easy, not uncomplicated, but honest for the first time. She apologized once, formally and carefully, in a text message that clearly took her a long time to write. I told her the apology wasn't necessary, but that I appreciated it. We met for coffee twice. We talked about Grandma Rose. We talked about the bakery. She had some memories I didn't have because she'd been there at different times. Childhood visits I hadn't been part of. And hearing them felt like finding pages from the green binder that I hadn't known were missing. She asked me once if she could have a copy of the letters. I said yes. The punitive damages paid for a new walk-in compressor that had been on the bakery's maintenance list for 2 years and a professional restoration of the front display case, which had a hairline crack in the glass that Grandma Rose had been meaning to fix and never gotten to. I hired a part-time baker, a young man named August, who had come in to apply with a sample of his laminated dough and whose layers were genuinely exceptional. I kept the cardamom roll recipe exactly as written. The line that had always been there: let the dough rest longer than you think. I read it every time. It felt like advice about more than bread. Some mornings, early before August arrives and before the street outside gets busy, I stand at the work table in the kitchen and it is very quiet and I think about what Grandma Rose actually gave me. The bakery, yes. The recipes, yes. But also this: she had kept her own records. 43 years of careful books, clean accounts, documented decisions. She had built something that could be defended because she had built it honestly, and she had trusted me to do the same. She hadn't protected me from my uncle. She hadn't needed to. She had equipped me. She had known, the way she seemed to know most things, that I would figure it out. The front door of Rosie's opens at 7. There is almost always, by 5 past, someone waiting outside. The cardamom rolls come out at 7:30, and they are gone before 9. That part hasn't changed. That part I think will never change. She built something real. I'm taking care of it. I've thought a lot about why my uncle did what he did. Not to excuse it. There's no version of this where taking $67,000 from an 81-year-old woman becomes understandable. But because I think understanding how something happens is the only way to make sure it doesn't happen again. He believed he deserved it. That's the honest answer. He had spent decades telling himself a story about what the family owed him, and somewhere along the way, the story became real to him. He watched my grandmother build something with her hands, watched it succeed, watched it hold its value year after year. And he decided that proximity to it entitled him to a share he was never offered. When she didn't leave it to him, he didn't grieve. He strategized. That's the thing about people who operate this way. They're not impulsive. They plan. Every transfer was timed carefully. Every document was filed in a county far enough away to avoid notice. He had been building toward this for years before she ever got sick, and when she did get sick, he moved faster. He used her declining handwriting to put his name on accounts. He used her love for him, and she did love him, I have no doubt about that, as a door he could walk through without being questioned. What stopped him wasn't luck. It was documentation. Grandma Rose kept 43 years of Queen books. She kept her own records. She wrote letters in her own hand, in her own words, on cream-colored notepaper, and she kept writing them until 6 weeks before she died. She built something honest, and she left me the tools to prove it. That's not an accident. She was specific about everything. She was specific about this. I think about that when I'm in the kitchen in the early mornings before August arrives, before the street outside gets loud. She knew exactly what she was doing when she put my name on those documents. She knew what I did for work. She knew I would look at the books. She trusted me to find what needed to be found, not because she wanted a fight, but because she had spent a lifetime building something real, and she understood that real things have to be defended by people who are paying attention. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the trial, not my uncle sitting in that courtroom watching his own daughter refuse to look at him. The part I keep coming back to is the green binder on the second shelf. 61 letters in an archival folder. A savings account with no unexplained transfers. She knew what integrity looked like in practice. She didn't just have values. She kept records of them. I am not the same person I was the morning I got that first call from Mr. Okonkwo. Something in me got quieter and more certain at the same time. I understand now that honesty isn't just a personal quality. It's a structure. You build it the way you build anything that lasts. Carefully, consistently, over a long period of time, with attention to the details other people skip. And when someone tries to tear it down, the structure holds. Not because of luck, because of the work that went into it. The cardamom rolls come out at 7:30. There's almost always a line. She built something real. I'm taking care of it.